Now what we want to do in this lesson is get you set up with the boilerplate project. Now for this I'm using VS Code. I would also recommend that you follow along using VS Code or your own favorite IDE or text editor. In the previous lesson you can go ahead and find the setup or the download instructions, which will then give you the access to download this boilerplate. So once you've opened it inside your text editor, it's time for us to get started. Now we're not going to do too much in this video. We're simply going to have a quick walkthrough of the files just so you can familiarize yourself with what's inside. Now, first things first, let's open up our src, our source directory, and inside there you're going to find an index.js. So throughout most of the course, we're going to be using this index.js file as we have with other JavaScript courses so far. This then imports any global styling which we've defined inside of our assets. So here we have our style.css. We don't need to worry about touching any of this. I've set this up ahead of time for you. We've also got a fonts folder. Again, we don't need to worry, and a couple of images. So that's the assets folder. That's the source folder. That's what we're going to be coding with in this course. I'll give you a quick walkthrough of the package.json because that's essentially the next most important piece. The scripts that we're going to be using are this start command, which is then going to run our Webpack development server. Now, where does that come from? We have this specified as a development dependency because we have our dev dependencies object here. So these are all the tools that we are using, and we're going to install them momentarily to get our project up and running, much like we have in the other courses. We also have a watch command if we want to, and a build command to give us a final built output. However, we don't really need to worry about this during the course. So that's all the dev dependencies. You can see that we have our Babel, we have a couple of plugins. We also have something called ESLint. This allows us to have some particular code rules set up, and we've then tied that in with our Babel parser. Now, Babel allows us to write more modern JavaScript, and we have this .babelrc, which we have a couple of presets and some plugins if we want to go ahead and use things such as the class properties or the private methods properties. All the magic for the project happens inside of our Webpack configuration file. You can have a look through this in your own time. We don't really need to go through and explain. We just need to know that it works. We have things such as our development server. It's going to serve up our dist directory. So if we highlight the word dist here, we should see this further up the top. So it takes our bundles, it compiles our JavaScript from our source, our index, and then it outputs the JavaScript file virtually in our dist, which is then served by Webpack on our development server, which means that inside our index.html, you may be wondering why there are no script tags, and that is exactly why. So Webpack is going to dynamically inject these for us at runtime, so we don't need to worry about configuring script tags and different types of imports, etc. So that's a nice quick walkthrough of our project and the source files involved. So now what we want to do is bring up our terminal. You can see we have this toggle terminal control plus the apostrophe. So if you want to bring up a new terminal, or you can do it from the menu up above, we just simply want to run a quick npm install. Now this, if we look at our package.json, is going to go and download every single dependency and any dependencies of those dependencies and put them neatly in our node modules folder. So everything that we need is in there. We don't really need to look at it. We just need to know that our dependencies are there for us to use. How do we use these dependencies? We talked briefly about the package.json file where we have this start command and we have our Webpack dev server. Now what we can do is simply run npm and start. This will then go ahead and you can see it's running our Webpack dev server. It's compiled successfully and it's running on our localhost 4000. So let's go ahead and bring up the browser. On the browser, you should see something like this, where we have our project working fully. We can open up our source directory if we want, make a quick modification, and you can see that this gives us real-time compilation and it's live reloaded it for us. And you can see that we have a nice message in the console telling us that the live reload is now enabled. So that's a quick walkthrough of the project. We've got everything set up. We now understand the project structure. We've got everything installed and we're ready to continue with the rest of the course. So let's move on and get started with the next chapter.